Hey guys, thanks for joining me for another episode of Learn to Play Games. My name is Lance, and today we're going to take a look at The Others. This is a 2 to 5 player game that takes roughly an hour and a half to 2.5 hours. This is one of the newer games by Cool Mini or Not, and it was debuted at Gen Con. This is one of the games I've been really looking forward to tackling for a while. I got, as some of you know that followed my channel, my very first video was a preview of this game with Eric Lang showing us a little bit of what the game was. So, in the game itself, one player is going to play one of the 7 deadly sins. In the core box, you're going to get 2. You'll get Pride and Sloth. There will be expansions to add the other 5 in. For those of you that kickstart it, you will have those already. So, when that player chooses the sin, he'll choose that and he'll get all these different other options that will form up his player dashboard, and he has a number of choices, and then the other players will play the heroes, or what I kind of refer to as the anti-heroes, because you have werewolves and vampires, demons and half-humans and good and like evil humans and things like that have kind of come together in this most desperate hour to basically try to hold back the sins from taking over everything, because obviously they want to fight for their own cities and they don't want somebody telling them what to do. So they're coming in and trying to push the darkness out, basically. So the game itself will play, the sins player will be playing that sin and will be fighting against the other players. And the overall goal of the game is for the heroes to accomplish a certain number of missions that will be outlined in the story that they've chosen to play. The sins player will do his best to stop them by killing those heroes. And at any point in the game, if you will start with a team of 7 heroes, and the players will choose which heroes that they want to start with, either 3 or 4 depending upon the number of players. The other heroes will go into reserve, and from there, as the players die, they will go to that reserve to bring out another hero. If at any point in time there isn't another hero to bring out, then the heroes have lost the game and the sin has defeated them. Otherwise, if the players have accomplished the goals, then they will defeat the sin and win the game. So I've had a ton of fun with this game. This is, like I said, developed by Eric Lang. He really does a fantastic job with his games. He has a lot of depth and strategy, and each game does play very differently. And he's not afraid to punish players, and this game definitely is no exception to that rule. You will die, and the Sins player will have a blast doing it. He really has an arsenal on his side that he can throw at you anytime. So you really have to work together as a team and kind of anticipate some of what he can potentially do. There's no way to anticipate all of it, but just to kind of work together as a group and really focus on what you're doing and don't get too carried away with other things, because as the game progresses, the apocalypse traffic is going to move down. Things are going to get more and more nasty for the heroes as time progresses, and that Sin player has a chance to build up. So let's head to the table, and I'll teach you how to play. Now we're going to go over setting up the Sins player's dashboard. So the first thing we're going to do is choose which sin we'd like to play with. In the core box, you have 2 sins to choose from, Pride and Sloth. So once you make your decision, so we're going to play with Pride this game, then we're going to go ahead and take a look at the breakdown of the card. So it's going to list the name of the sin at the top, and then it's going to show the 3 enemies that sin's going to have. So we have the Abomination, his figure and the attack dice and defense value for him, the Controller, his attack and defense, and the Avatar with his attack and defense. And then each sin is going to have an effect that is going to take place throughout the game. And so this one is Beware Lone Heroes. When a hero fights alone, ignore 1 defense. So that effect will be in the entire game. From here, the next thing we're going to do is choose an accolade to play with. And again, the core box comes with 3. The Corrupted Doctor, Corrupted Nun, or Corrupted Hobo. On the side of the accolade card is also going to list their fight and defense. And then each one is going to have an effect that can be used once per round. So we're going to go ahead and take the Doctor. And with the Doctor, it says that once per round, we can summon a dead Doctor to join a non-ranged fight. Before dice are rolled, mark the current hero who may not heal wounds until the next round. So that's going to be really handy for us. From here, then we can go ahead and add the Apocalypse track, which will complete the Sins player's dashboard. He will also add a tentacle up at the 0 slot, and then we can gather the figures that we need. So we're going to have 6 abominations for the Sins player, and these will look just like that one. They are going to have a couple of different scopes, so they're going to have a little bit of a difference, just to add some flair. Then we can go ahead and grab the 6 corrupt doctors, which again, there will be 3 different sculpts. You'll have nurses and a couple of doctors. We can also grab the controller and go ahead and place the black base on him so you can easily point him out that he's the controller. And the avatar, which is an absolutely huge, beautiful model. From here, then, depending upon the number of players that are playing, go ahead and grab a reaction token for each player. So we're going to play with 3 heroes, and so we'll get 3 reaction tokens, which I'll take a look at those more later. And then we also get a marked token for our accolades. So when we use this ability, we can mark it so that we know that we've used it and we don't end up using it again during the round. And then last, we're going to go ahead and grab the deck of Sins cards. You can go ahead and shuffle those up, and then you can go ahead and draw out the first 5 from that deck, and that will be the Sins player's starting hand. And these cards won't replenish when the Sins player uses them, which he can use 1 card per hero activation and his reaction to it. So once he uses those cards, they're going to be discarded, and he won't redraw them up. He'll get to draw cards at the end of each turn based on the number of altars that the heroes are not occupying, which we'll take a look at during that part of the game. Here we have the Sin dice, and so you have the 6 different sides. You have 1 blank side, 2 fist sides that count as hits, 2 corruption sides that will add corruption, and 1 hit with a burst. When the Sin player rolls a hit with a burst, for each one of those dice that comes up, you get to roll an additional dice. And those dice work the same way. If you roll another burst, then you can continue rolling those dice and adding those fists. Here's an example of one of the heroes players can choose to play as. So as far as the card breakdown, you have the hero's name. On the side of the card, it's going to list the class of that hero. There's bruisers, fixers, leaders, and shooters. And each one is going to have their own color as well, so you can identify them nice and easily. On the side here, we have 3 different icons. You have the fight icon, which is going to show the number of dice you roll when you are in a fight. You have the cleanse icon, which will show you the number of dice you'll roll when you're trying to make a cleansing check. And your static defensive value, so the number of shields that you're going to have each time you have to take damage. And then each of the heroes is going to have their own special ability. So for Morgana, she has vampiric regeneration, and she can heal 1 of her wounds at the end of her turn. After that, then you have the corruption track, which will have a tentacle in it at the beginning of the game, and then you have your health track at the bottom. Each hero is going to have 5 wound tokens that are going to be dealt to them at the beginning of the game, and that is the maximum amount of damage that a hero can take before they're killed. From here, I'd like to cover a couple of important concepts. The first one is corruption and taking corruption. So there's 2 ways that you can get corruption. Either forced, which is as a result of actions that the Sins player does or from combat. And with that, with the forced corruption, heroes will not gain any benefits from it. The other type of corruption is voluntary. A hero can voluntarily take corruption at any time before they make their dice roll, either for fights or for cleansing checks. When they voluntarily take corruption, they're going to move their corruption track up 1 point, and then they will receive the bonus that's listed under that and every bonus before it. So let's go ahead and say, for example, that Morgana was at corruption 4 and she chose to take voluntary corruption to move it up to level 5 as she's going into combat. So she would receive 3 dice for combat, and then she would also receive an additional dice for her first slot here. She does an automatic hit from that one, so you can put a dice with a fist symbol on it. Then she gets another defense, so you could put another dice for defense. Then she would gain an additional dice, and the last one has no effect. So she would roll 5 dice for that combat, and then she would also have these two results right off the bat. Now this only affects the combat roll that she's currently doing. After that, then the effects go away and she would return to using her 3 dice unless she takes another corruption. Now, if you're at maximum corruption, you cannot choose to take any voluntary corruption. And at that point, if you're forced to take any corruption, it's going to do wounds to you instead. Now, when you take wounds, you can choose to cover up any one of the slots that you want. So obviously the first one you always want to cover up is the no effect. From there, based on where your corruption is, you may want to cover up the later ones if your corruption is low, because most likely you won't get to them, and you can try to heal after that. But so like I said, once you take that 5th wound, then you are dead, and that player is killed, so that's a hero would be removed from the game. Now, a couple other things with corruption. When a hero reaches maximum corruption, if they're playing a mission that has them holding any innocents, those innocents will be killed and those tokens will be removed from that hero. On top of that, if you're playing a corruption story arc, at that point, if you have a Dark Past card, which is one of these, you would reveal it and also do its effects immediately. In the core set, there are 7 heroes that are included, but as expansions come out, you can change out those heroes, but to make up a party, you're going to have 1 leader, 2 bruisers, 2 shooters, and 2 fixers. And on top of that, in the base game, one of our fixers, Carl, can change from human form to wolf form, so make sure you have your sleeve for that. So depending upon the number of players, as you can see on this chart here, will be the number of heroes that will start the game. So each player will choose a hero to play as. Any heroes that aren't selected will be returned to a reserve section, and as players die, then they will choose heroes from the reserve section to play as. If at any point in time a player dies and there are no heroes left in the reserve, then the game is over and the Sins player has won. So once a player makes a selection for their hero, they will get their 5 wound tokens that they can place somewhere around their hero, and they will get 1 tentacle token that they'll place in the first slot of corruption, and then they're also going to get their miniature. And make sure that you have the little clip-on base that will go onto that figure. And then for Carl, he'll also get his slide for his wolf form, and he'll have his miniature for that as well. Once the players have done that, they're ready to start. Here we have the Faith dice. So we have 2 successful hit symbols. Then we have a defense symbol, which will cancel out a successful hit from the Sins player. We have a skill symbol, so when the heroes do cleansing tests, each one of these symbols rolled will allow them to cleanse an area of 1 token that's on there that they can remove. We have counter corruption, which will cancel out a corruption symbol that the Sins player rolls. And the last dice is the faith symbol itself. When any player rolls a faith symbol, they get to roll an additional dice, and those dice will continue to be rolled if faith symbols are rolled on them. Once all the dice are done and situated, then for each faith symbol that the player rolls, they can choose to change that symbol to any other symbol that they want, which could be a hit, another defense. They just can't change it to another faith symbol. All right, so the other thing that heroes have to decide at the beginning of the game is what kind of story they're going to go on. So in the core box, there are 7 different stories to choose from, and there's 3 different types of stories. We have terror stories, corruption stories, and redemption stories. And there'll be 2 terror, 2 corruption, 2 redemption, and then a final battle story. So once the heroes have chosen which story they're going to go on, so we have Haven's Last Stand. The game here is going to give us a basic rundown, a little backstory on what's going on. And then it's also going to give us conditions. So at the start of each round, the Sins player is going to do this. And at the end of each round, these things will take effect. Now, as far as on this side, we have the missions that the players are going to go on. So we can go ahead and put a tentacle out at the top and on the mission progress track. From here, this is our currently active mission. So our first thing is to gear up and we equipped, and this symbol here means that based on the number of heroes that are playing currently, so we're going to play a 3-hero game, so this means that we have to equip 3 heroes with upgrade cards. Once we accomplish that, and each time we get a hero that gets an upgrade, then we can move the upgrade track down here. So when we get to 3, then we have successfully completed that mission, and then it'll branch. So our heroes must collectively choose which of the missions that they would like to go on from here. Once they've made that selection, then they will progress to that mission, and that will be the active mission. So if we're up here, we cannot start completing objectives in this mission until we actually get to it. So once the heroes complete this, then we will summon the avatar, and so he'll be put out on the board, and the heroes will try to accomplish their last mission. If the heroes make it through all the missions successfully, then they have won the game. And on the back of each of the cards is also going to give us map layouts for that mission. And it gives us 2 different choices along with the layouts that we'll have, the tokens that we're going to use, and where to place the monsters at the start of the game. Here we have an example of a couple of the game tiles that you'll be seeing. So there are 5 distinct features on some of the game tiles, so let's go ahead and take a look at those now. So the first one is the district zone, which are the buildings. These buildings are considered one space. Then you have the street spaces, which are going to be separated by the crosswalks. So this would be considered one street space. This is one street space. And this is one street space. After that, you have permanent icons that are going to be on some of the tiles. Those can never be removed, covered, or cleansed by the heroes. Next, we have the city action slots, where the hero will place their city action to be able to perform the actions that are listed. And these are considered the city actions. So if a hero places their token there, they would be able to pick up 2 upgrade items, 1 for each of the upgrade pictures. And then over on this one, we have the satellite. So a hero would be able to activate the satellite, and then the hero would also gain an extra turn token. So board setup is very easy and very straightforward. Once you make your selection of story that you're going to play, so we've chosen the terror story, Haven's Last Stand. On the back of the card, as you guys can see up in the top left-hand corner here, we've selected Map B to set up. Now my camera can't get the whole view, so I'm going to just explain to you guys what goes up here. But just like on the mission map setup, it's just those things. So the first things I'm going to put out are the faith symbol, which is where our heroes will start, as well as the satellite symbol. The other things that will go up there are the monorail tracks. So one will go at the top of the board, and the other one's going to come down here on the side. From here, then we'll go out and put out the 7 sin signs, and I will explain what those do. From here, then we can go ahead and put out the pentagram signs. So we'll have 1 here and 1 here. We have corruption tokens. And one thing to keep in mind as well is the tokens that you get in the game itself will be cardboard. These are upgraded tokens. I decided to open this up and use it for my game, and so I haven't punched out the cardboard tokens yet because I don't need them. So from here, then we can go ahead and put out the commissioner, the proxy, and the Raven Corp in their spots. Now that we have all the different tokens out, we can go ahead and place out all the accolades into their spots. And then we can go and put out the abominations. We can put out the controller. From there, each player can go ahead and put out their hero dashboards. Once the players have done that, they will receive 2 turn tokens with the blue side face up. They will also get their 5 wound tokens, and they will each get a corruption token. They also will get 1 city activation token, and they can go ahead and place their miniatures in the starting slot on the top of the board. We can also put out the upgrade cards, so go ahead and shuffle that deck up and then put out 5 upgrade cards so that the players can choose from those when they get to those spots. And then last, the Sins player can set his board up too. Now, granted, you'll have more space than I do, so you can put it wherever you guys want. Depending upon the story you guys are playing, go ahead and shuffle up the Apocalypse cards as well for that story. The Terror cards. From here, you're ready to start the game. So at the start of the round, we're going to follow the things that we are listed here. So it says place the following tokens, each one at a different space. So the Sins player is going to go ahead and gather a corruption token, a fire token, and a pentagram, and he's going to place those in different spaces. So let's go ahead and add a corruption here. We'll add a fire token there, and let's add a pentagram. Let's go pentagram here. All right, so from here then we move into the heroes, and they get to decide collectively which is going to be the starting hero for the turn. Once they've made that selection, then play will progress in a clockwise manner. So if Morgana goes, then it would be Rose's turn next, and it will continue around the players. So let's go ahead and say that, let's go ahead and give it to Leah, since she's the leader anyways. So first things first is that she has a special ability which at the start of your turn, your first turn, each round, give any player, any hero, an extra turn token. So she gets to give one player an extra turn token. So we'll go ahead and give it to Rose. And then Leah is ready to start her turn. Now we're ready to move into the hero turn. So each hero has 2 turn tokens at his disposal, which means that each hero is going to take at least 2 turns around. Heroes take 1 turn at a time, starting with the hero that we've chosen to go first, and then proceeding in a clockwise order, with each hero taking 1 turn. Heroes can only take 1 turn at a time, and then play is going to pass to the next hero. If a hero still has any active tokens, turn tokens, available, he must flip one over and take a turn, even if he decides to do nothing during his turn. So starting with Leah, she is the player we've chosen to go first. We're going to flip over one of our active turn tokens to its non-active side. And then during her turn, she can move and take an action, or take an action and then move. The one thing to keep in mind is movement cannot be interrupted by an action and resumed afterwards. So let's take a closer look at movement. So when you move a hero or monster, they can move up to 2 spaces. And those spaces have to be adjacent, and an adjacent space is considered any space that shares edges. So, for example, like we've already talked about with the tile, the district space is considered 1 space, and there are no doors or windows, so a hero can move out in any direction they choose. And each space that the street has that's separated by the crosswalks is also considered 1 space. So, for example, with Leah being her turn, she can choose to move into either one of these side street spaces or either one of these diagonal street spaces that she wants to. And then from there, then she could move into any adjacent space from there. So if she moves into this space here, then she could choose to move here, into this building over here, or into this building over here, because they're all considered adjacent to those spaces. All right, so the first token we're going to take a look at is the Metro. So only heroes can use the Metro system, monsters cannot. And when a hero is in a space that has a Metro, they can use one of their movement points to move to any other space that contains the Metro token, as long as it's the same color. So for example, our heroes could use this Metro token and shoot all the way down to the other side of the board that contains the other one. The next couple tokens that we're going to talk about are the Fire token and the Corruption token. So with these tokens, each time a hero moves into a space or out of a space that contains either the Fire token or Corruption token, the Sins player will make a Fire or Corruption check. So, for example, if our hero moves into this space that contains the Fire token, our Sins player will get to roll 1 dice for each fire symbol that's in that space. If he rolls a fist, then he does 1 damage to that hero. If he rolls the burst fist, then he can continue rolling just like normal. Now, when that hero moves out of that space again, he would get to do that fire check. And the same thing goes for the corruption. When a hero moves into or out of a space with corruption, that Sins player will roll a dice for each corruption symbol in there. And if he rolls a tentacle, then he's caused 1 point of corruption. Now, with the fire symbols, when the hero takes damage, they are not going to negate that damage with the defense value that hero has. The only thing that will help them is if they have an upgrade card for the biohazard suit. So the one other thing that we have is when a hero moves out of a space that contains any number of monsters, that hero will take 1 wound that cannot be negated, unless you have an upgrade card that allows otherwise. So in this situation, if our hero chose to move out of that space, she would take 1 damage because there's a monster in there. And then the other thing is with monsters, they are not affected by any of the tokens that are on the field, such as the fire or corruption tokens. They can move through those spaces freely. The one thing that monsters cannot do is move out of a space that contains a hero or any number of heroes. So if the Sins player chooses to move a monster, he cannot move monsters that are in spaces with heroes. So now let's take a look at the actions that a hero can choose from. So before or after moving, a hero can take 1 action, which is to start a fight, cleanse an area, or do nothing. So the first one we're going to go ahead and take a look at is to start a fight. So with it being Alea's turn, we're going to go ahead and do her movement first. So she's going to go ahead and move into this space here with this monster. And then for her action, she's going to go ahead and start a fight. So before she does that, since she moved into a space with fire token, the Sins player is going to go ahead and roll for the fire check. He does roll a successful hit, so she is going to take a wound. So we're going to go ahead and put it there. And then we're going to go ahead and initiate a fight. So the first thing we're going to do is prep our hero. So we're going to take a number of faith dice equal to that hero's combat value. So she's going to get 3 dice. From here, then we add 1 dice for each hero that's in the space with our hero. So if we had additional heroes in there, we'd be able to add additional dice. Right now we don't. If the player has the NPC Commissioner token, then she would receive 1 additional fight dice. Any additional dice are added from natural abilities or upgrade cards. Right now, Alea doesn't have any upgrade cards, and her natural ability does not grant her additional dice. And then we can always choose to take 1 corruption point that will potentially add dice. So right now, if Alea chose to take corruption, she would get 1 additional dice. But yeah, let's go ahead and take corruption. So we take 1 corruption, and we'll get 1 additional dice for this time. Then we can go ahead and prep the Sins player. The Sins player is going to receive a number of dice equal to each monster that's in that space. So if we had multiple monsters in here, Alea would be fighting all the monsters in the space and not just the one that was in there. So with the Sins player, the Abomination also gets 3 dice. There is no other monsters, so there won't be any more from that. The Sins player can also choose to add 1 card to the fights that he has for his Sin cards, which right now the Sins player is not going to. He would also get additional dice based on the Apocalypse track, which right now it does not grant us any dice. And from there, then we're ready to roll our dice. So each player is going to go ahead and roll their dice simultaneously. And then we're going to go ahead and separate them. So the Sins player has rolled 2 hits and a corruption. And our player has rolled 2 fists and an anti-corruption and a faith symbol. So she's going to get to roll an additional dice for the faith symbol. And she rolls another anti-corruption. So now that we've resolved all of our dice, we're going to go ahead and change this faith symbol. We need to change it to a fist so that we can do 3 damage to the Abomination. Because in order to kill a monster, you must do the amount of damage that's listed on that monster's defense value. So for the Abominations, it would be 3 damage. And there's no way to track wounds, so it's all or nothing. You either kill a monster that's in the space, or that monster gets out and doesn't take any damage. So in a situation where there was multiple monsters in there, you can choose how you divide up the damage. So we could choose to take all 3 hits against the Abomination, or we can do 2 hits to the Accolade and kill the Accolade and leave the Abomination. So in this situation, we did enough damage to kill our Abomination, so we'll go ahead and remove him. And we also canceled out the corruption, but the Abomination did successfully hit us twice, and we did not roll any defense. Now, we do have 1 defense on our character, but if you remember before when we talked about Pride, when we have a lone hero, they ignore 1 defense on there. So her 1 defense turns into 0, and so she's going to take 2 additional wounds. So from here, she's going to go ahead, and let's go ahead and put them on the back ends of our corruption track, because it's probably going to be a while before we get there. So right now, Aaliyah is sitting at 3 wounds, which is kind of dangerous because she only has 2 wounds left. At this point, the hero's turn would be done because we did our action and we already did our move. So that's all we can do for our hero turn, and our turn would end. Alright, so the other form of combat that we're going to look at is a ranged attack. So a ranged attack can only take place in the streets, and you have to have line of sight to your target. So you cannot draw a line of sight into a building, and if you're in a building, you cannot draw a line of sight out of the building. Now, models, both enemies and friends, do not block line of sight, and you can see the entire length of a street in a straight line. So, for example, our Leah can target anybody that's straight down our street, or she can target this accolade up here or the accolade down here. Now, there's a couple of differences the way ranged combat works. So first, you would go ahead and choose your target. So let's go ahead and say that we're shooting this guy down here. Once we do that, then we would gather the amount of dice that we get, and our character must have ranged ability, so Leah does, or you must have an upgrade card that grants ranged ability. So she would get her 3 dice as normal, and any additional dice for anything, including if she decides to take corruption, just like a normal fight. From there, then she could go ahead and roll her dice. If she rolls the dice and doesn't do enough damage to kill the monster, then the monster gets to react. And as long as there is not a hero that's in the space with the monster, that monster can move up to 2 spaces as long as he can reach the hero that shot at him. If the hero is too far away, then the monster simply does not move. But if the monster can reach the hero space, then they'll move in there and start a combat with that hero. And that will include all monsters that are in that space with the hero. So that is one thing that you have to be really careful of with ranged combat, because if you don't actually kill what you're shooting at, or all the monsters that are in that space, then they get to move at you and potentially gang up with you with other monsters that may be in that space with you. So at this point, don't discard the player's dice that they rolled, and a monster that gets to move in there would go ahead and do his attack next, and then you would resolve the attack with those dice that the hero rolled. So in this situation, we get an additional dice, and the hero would get their additional dice. And the hero is going to go ahead and change that to an anti-corruption. So the hero blocked the fist with that and canceled out the corruption, so nothing would happen. Alright, so the last type of action a hero can perform is the cleanse. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next hero that would go in order. So we have Rose here. So the first thing she's going to do is go ahead and move into this space with Leah. And again, she's going to take potentially fire damage, so the Sense player will roll. He does not roll a hit this time, so she's okay. And from here, she's going to go ahead and try to cleanse this space with that fire token to get rid of it. So in order to do that, she's going to go ahead and look at her card, and then she is going to have the focus result. And for her, she gets 4 dice for her focus, or for her skill check. And then she also will get an additional dice for each hero that's in her space. So she's going to pick up an additional dice there. And just like any other checks with the hero rolling dice, she could choose to take corruption to potentially add additional dice to that. But she's not going to. She gets 5 dice and there's only 1 symbol in there. So we're going to go ahead and go with that. So she's going to roll her dice. And for each of the focus symbols, or skill symbols that she rolls, she can remove 1 token from that space that is removable. Now there are certain spaces that have the tokens that are permanent on there, so like this spawning symbol, if that was, say, another fire token, she could not choose to remove that. So there is the 1 fire token, so she's going to go ahead and eliminate that fire token from that space, and the rest of the results are just wasted. Alright, so the last thing we're going to look at that a hero can do during their turn is to perform the city action. At any point during a hero's turn, the hero may choose to use the city actions offered by the district space they're currently occupying. This can be done as the first thing in a turn, the last, or before or after taking an action, or even between moves. It does not count as the single action that a hero can perform during their turn. It can be done even if there are monsters in that district space, And to perform a city action, the hero would simply take their city token and move it into the action. So let's go ahead and take Morgana's turn. So the first thing she'll do is flip over her active turn token. And then before she moves or does anything, let's go ahead and use our city action token. So we would simply place our token into that space, and as you can see, there is only one spot for that, so only one hero can use each district each round. So once she places that, she can perform and benefit from all of the actions that are connected to it. So the first thing is that she can activate the satellite. So the satellite token will be activated and can move up to 2 spaces, just like any other hero or monster. So we're going to go ahead and move it down here. Once we're done with the movements, then we can choose to automatically kill either an accolade or abomination that's in that space for free. So we're going to go ahead and kill that guy. And then from there, she's also going to get an extra turn token. So we'll go ahead and put that by her player card. From here, then she can go ahead and take her turn as normal. So unlike the hero players, a Sins player doesn't get their own turn per se. After each hero finishes their turn, the Sins player can choose to spend a reaction token or not. If he doesn't want to react, then play continues to the next hero in clockwise order. If he chooses to react, then he's going to flip over one of his reaction tokens and take his turn. The Sins player can only perform a single reaction at a time and only against the hero that just finished taking their turn. If all the Sins reaction tokens are used, then the Sins player cannot react at the end of each hero's round, but can still choose to play a Sin card as normal. So let's go ahead and say that we just finished Morgana's turn, and so it's the Sin's turn to choose whether he wants to react. So he's going to go ahead and do that. So he'll flip over one of his reaction tokens, and then when he does that, he's allowed to move one monster anywhere on the board up to 2 spaces as normal. So we're going to go ahead and say that we know that the heroes are going to try to get into this space. So let's go ahead and make it a little bit harder. We're going to move this abomination 1 space there and then into that space for our second move. From here, then we can initiate a combat with the active hero, the hero that just finished their turn. So we could not start a combat here because these heroes did not go. So for the sake of this example, we're going to go ahead and say that we had an acolyte in this space with Morgana. And that way then we're going to be able to initiate a combat. And a combat is going to take place with all the monsters that are in that space with Morgana against only her. So at this point, it's a good time to show you guys how the acolyte's special ability works too, the Corrupt Doctor. And it says, once per round, summon a dead doctor to join a non-ranged fight before dice are rolled. Mark the current hero who may not heal wounds until the next round. So we're going to go ahead and mark this, saying that we've used it, and we're going to go ahead and put a mark on Morgana so she knows that she can't heal until the next round. So at that point, we're going to bring in one of our acolytes that were killed, and keep in mind that we must have one that was killed in order to use this. If we don't have any that are off the board, then we cannot use this ability. So at this point, we would just go into a combat as normal. So our hero is going to gather up her dice, so she's going to get 3 dice. She doesn't have any natural abilities or upgrade cards to give her bonuses, and she doesn't have any heroes in the space with her. But she can choose to take corruption as normal, so she is going to do that so that she gets an additional dice. From here, then the Sins player can go ahead and gather up his dice. He gets 2 dice per accolade that's in that combat. Now, he doesn't have any pentagrams in that space, which would grant him additional dice. And he doesn't have any bonuses on the Apocalypse track yet. And he's not going to choose to use any of his Sins cards. So this is what he'll get. So we're going to go ahead and roll these results and see what happens. Alright, so we've gotten 3 hits and a corruption from our Sins player. And the Faith player has rolled 2 focus, which is useless, and 2 fists. So at this point, then we will go ahead and resolve that combat. So she does 2 damage, so she's going to kill one of the acolytes. And then the acolytes have done 3 damage to her. So she has 2 defense, but keep in mind with Pride, his special ability that affects all the heroes is Beware Lone Heroes. When a hero fights alone, ignore 1 defense. So instead of having 2, she would only have 1. So she would stop 1 hit, but 2 are going to get through. So she's going to take 2 wounds, and she can distribute those anywhere she wants to. And then she's going to take 1 corruption. So she's going to move her corruption symbol up 1 track, and that fight is over. So now we're ready to move into the end of round. A round ends when all the heroes have spent all of their active turn tokens, and they don't wish to use any of their extra turn tokens. If the Sins player still has any active reaction tokens left, he can choose to spend one. Any additional ones after that are simply just wasted and he cannot use them this round. From here, then we're going to go ahead and check our storyboard and see what the effects are at the end of the round. So it says for us that we're going to raise the Apocalypse track by 1, and then we raise it by 1 again if any number of heroes were killed this round. So none of the heroes were killed, so we're going to just raise it by 1. And then it says reveal an Apocalypse card. So we're going to flip over the top card from the Apocalypse deck. And this says Stab in the Dark. Each abomination gains 1 hit in fights. And so that will stay in effect for the rest of the game. From here, then the Sins player gets to summon monsters. So he gets to summon a number of monsters equal to the number of heroes that are in play. So we have 3 heroes, so he can summon up to 3 monsters. And those are only monsters that were killed. He can't summon, say, the Avatar, since it hasn't been summoned yet. So we have 2 monsters that were killed this round, and so he can place those monsters in any nest space that is open. And a nest space is considered open as long as there isn't a monster taking it. So if, for example, on this street zone, we could place 1 monster because there aren't any monsters currently on there. But if there was one, then we could not place a monster there. Heroes do not block nest sites. If all of the sites are occupied and there aren't any, then the Sins player simply cannot spawn additional monsters. So we're going to go ahead and place one of our monsters here and one down there. From here, then the Sins player gets to draw additional Sin cards based on the altars that are in play. And if the heroes are on a space that contains an altar, then the altar is blocked and the Sins player will not be able to draw a card. But right now we have 2 altars that are open, so the Sins player gets to draw 2 additional cards into his deck. Once all that is done, then the final thing to do is to reset all of the tokens. So each hero player will get to flip over their turn tokens. The Sins player will get to flip over his turn reaction tokens and remove his marks that he's used. The hero players will receive their city actions back, and then we're ready to move into the beginning of the next round. Now I'd like to go over hero death. So immediately when the 5th wound marker is placed on a hero's dashboard, that hero is killed. If it's that hero's turn, it ends, and this means that the Sins player cannot spend a reaction token at this point. Play would move straight to the next hero. So the hero's figure and dashboard are going to be removed from the game. The extra turn and marked tokens are discarded. So if the hero had any extra turn tokens, those tokens would be discarded. So we're going to go ahead and say Morgana has taken her 5th wounds due to the Sins player attacking or something. So she would remove her board as well as her figure from the board. The hero's turn and city action tokens remain as they were. If the hero had any upgrade cards, those upgrade cards are placed face up next to the rest of the upgrade cards. The player will choose one of the reserve heroes at that point. So we're going to use some ranged attacks now, I think. So we'll go with Rico. And we'll place his figure out in the starting space. We place the corruption token on the first slot, and he will get his hearts back. And play will proceed. And so when it comes back to his turn, if he has any turn tokens left, then he can activate just like any other hero. On top of that, if we did discard any upgrade cards, at this point he can choose that number of upgrade cards, not just the ones that were discarded, but any of the ones that are available, if he had any. Now, just like before, as I said, if a hero dies and the player needs to choose a hero from the reserve and there are no heroes left, that is the end of the game and the Sins player has defeated the heroes. So I hope that gave you a good idea of how the game plays and how it runs. As always, if you guys have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And feel free to drop me any comments as well as what you think of the video, if there was anything I could have done to improve it, or if there's anything that you guys would like to see in the future. for games and that you'd like me to cover. I got a number of new games from Gen Con, and so you guys will be seeing those. I'll be dropping some new videos here shortly on top of these. So I got a lot of different games and different styles, so you guys got some stuff to look forward to that. And like I said, if you guys have something that you really want to see or would like me to cover, I'm always interested to see what you guys are doing, or just let me know what you guys are playing or what you guys think was good at Gen Con, or games that you think I should check out that I might like. So as always, see you guys at the table.